This video is not going to need too much preamble. This is the Lenovo Yoga Slim 7. This is an Intel Lunar Lake model. It has the 258V with the 140V iGPU here. This is a fantastic laptop. If you watch my channel, you know how much I love Lenovo Yoga chassis, Lenovo Yoga laptops. I buy them all the time. This one's a loaner. Lenovo sent it over to me. Send it back after, unfortunately, or I could just steal it. How would they know? How would they know? This one here is fantastic. It has a lot of different options on it. You can get different OLED screens. They're all OLEDs, but you can get different options there. Very thin chassis, very premium laptop. Let's jump into the builder now, look at the different options from it. But I will tell you, if you are looking for an incredibly efficient, battery-wise and performance-wise laptop that is very premium, this is probably the one you'd want to get. Let's have a look at the PSRef document here just for some quick spec overviews. Basically, it gives us our breakdown of ports there. A couple Thunderbolt ports is nice, obviously. Very good. Coming down here, there are 3 CPU options. We have the 258V, the 256V, and then we have the 226V. I definitely recommend getting one of these 2 processors here. There is a pretty big boost to performance in terms of the iGPU, if you are going to be doing iGPU heavy tasks. The actual cores and threads aren't a big difference, but that iGPU performance boost is nice. The 258V might be the way to go here. The reason being is you also get 32 gigabytes of RAM. 32 gigabytes of RAM is very important. This is the American builder here. 32 gigabytes of RAM is essential because it is soldered in the system. Whereas, if you get 16 gigabytes of RAM, it's already kind of not enough for anything beyond simple word processing and basic Windows tasks. So you're going to be locked into that. So I definitely recommend going with the 32 gigabyte system, which then builds you into the higher processor anyways. And it's not a gigantic increase in price over the very base one. So it's definitely worth it in many cases. Moving down here, there's only one screen option. There's only one screen option here. It is a 1200p screen, not the finest resolution, but it's only 14 inches. So not the end of the world for me. Multi-touch, I couldn't care less about that, but some people probably do. OLED is nice. You're going to get very good blacks, and then you're also going to get really good colors on this specific OLED here, 100% DCI-P3. So it's going to be a beautiful screen overall. It is glossy, be aware of that. Only 60 hertz refresh, but for the purpose of this laptop, it should be fine overall. This is what you want here. This is the laptop you want. I wouldn't recommend the other options. Okay, let's have a look at the chassis. I typically very much like Lenovo Yoga laptops overall. They're very sleek. They're kind of MacBook-esque, I guess. That's the thing. People are always looking for that MacBook style. Very thin on this laptop here. So they always look bigger on camera, but this is a very thin laptop. It's rounded, very thin overall. Without the feet there, you can see just how thin it is. Thin screen, thin chassis. It's all metal, metal top, metal bottom, so you get a lot of rigidity. This thing feels like a brick. It feels like, again, if you've used a MacBook, it feels like that. Despite being very thin, it's extremely rigid. Right? Very rigid. Absolutely no flex on it whatsoever. No creak at all. Silent laptop. The brushed metal is beautiful. I like this color. This is kind of my preference for a laptop because it just does avoid fingerprints. There are fingerprints all over this thing, but you just can't see them unless you really get in the lighting. I didn't even wipe this down. This is a review unit they just sent me, so that's good. Bottom, big intake, speaker out there. So just a typical Yoga. They all kind of look similar. Very nice. Weight on it is quite low. I can feel in hand. So our weight there is very low, 1308 grams. That's very light. And the charger here is not a big charger, just a low wattage charger because it's a Lunar Lake chip. It doesn't need it. We'll even leave the bag on. So little over 3 pounds for everything, 1500 grams, including the charger. So that's a very light laptop despite the metal chassis. Port selection remains good though. Full-size HDMI out, fantastic for such a tiny little laptop. 2 Thunderbolt ports there, so if you don't have the ports you need, you can easily expand them. Micro SD card there, hinting that this is towards people who are professionals or creators doing stuff like graphic design, photography, videography, whatever. Right side there, you get a legacy port, USB-A. That's your power and camera kill switch and headphones. So you get 2 USB-C, which are Thunderbolt, and a USB-A and video out. So it's actually a fantastic port for a laptop of the size. Material, but it's very rigid on the top here. Absolutely no flex. We'll get to the typing section, but there's zero flex. Like that is, you'd have to like break the laptop to get it to flex. You get some speakerage grill there. Very nice. Nice trackpad. Glass trackpad or glossy trackpad there. Very nice, very sleek, glossy screen, camera bump out, which I like. Some people, I don't know why they care, but it allows there to be no bezel and allows you to put in a better camera. I don't know why that's a divisive thing to have a little thing above your laptop. I think it's fantastic. And typical yoga style keyboard. This one is the rubbery style keycap, kind of similar to a Microsoft Surface. Sometimes they use a plasticky material. I don't have a preference towards one or the other. They're nice overall. So that looks nice and clean. Let's get inside the laptop now and see what makes it tick. Okay, so let's look inside the laptop. These yoga style laptops, yoga and some of the idea pads and pros and that, use the star style. 2 actually removable screws there, 2 washer style screws. These are typically fairly easy to get into because they're like a unibody thing. So just put the little guitar pick thing right in there. That's where I like to go. And then you don't have to be too aggressive with it. Just like that. And then like that, very easy to get into, just like all the other yogas. Metal bottom, thin metal, but it does provide some structure, and it's obviously very premium as a result. Keeps the weight down by being thin, that's nice. Intake there, some block off, nothing special, just some structure. And there's a look inside the laptop. So it's a pretty standard looking yoga inside. They kind of all look the same. There's not a lot of room for motherboard and upgradability because they're very thin. Like this is a very, very thin chassis. The actual chassis is extremely thin, but they don't want to put in a tiny battery. So what they need to do is they need to stretch the battery this way, right? If the battery was coming this way towards you, the laptop itself would become thicker. Then you could bring the motherboard down and add more stuff. But there's just no room for that. So what they do is they add in a nice large battery, 70 watt hours right here. Add the battery in there. So it does need to squish up everything there. And then they kind of are limited in other stuff, basically. These speakers here should sound pretty good. They are the more modern style of Lenovo speakers where they're rectangular and they typically sound a little better. I haven't listened to them, but I assume they'll probably sound at least decent. Upgradable Wi-Fi for people who like that. That's nice to see. There's no solder despite the tiny little, like tiny little motherboard there, honestly. The SSD is upgradable, 2242. There's just nowhere to put a larger one. That's the reset button, by the way, the ACR reset. So if your BIOS gets messed up, you can press that. I think you can press it through. Yeah, right there. So if your BIOS setups ever get messed up, like black screen, you just can't boot in, you can always try that first. Yeah, so the 2242 is the max size you can go. There's just nowhere to put it, right? It'd be nice if they could have a 2280, but I don't see physically anywhere in the system they could put it. So it's not like they're messing up. They could make the battery smaller, make it a 60 watt hour battery, and then bring a little bit more room down. That is one concession. I don't think the buyer of this laptop would care, right? Like you can still get these up to 2 terabytes and they're a little more expensive, but I mean, probably the buyer of this laptop won't care. You have access to Thunderbolt for more storage. So there has to be a concession somewhere. RAM as well is soldered. These Intel Lunar Lake chips typically have soldered RAM. I actually haven't seen any without it. I'm not sure if it's necessity or it's just what Intel's doing, but there's just no other option. But as a result, the RAM will run considerably faster, very, very fast, which means the integrated graphics and the CPU is going to get more boost out of it. The cooling system is massive for a Lunar Lake laptop. Lunar Lake is like, you could just slap a Lunar Lake CPU into a handheld, which they do, at like full wattage and it will run cool because they're not a high wattage chip by any means. They don't need to be. They're actually very efficient. So this has a dual fan setup and dual heat pipe. It's not a thick heat pipe, but it's actually not super, super, super thin. It's a reasonably robust heat pipe setup and massive fan setup. So I expect this thing to run very cool. Not sure how noisy it'll be, but it should run extremely cool. So not really much in terms of upgradability, but you can swap out the Wi-Fi down the road and you can swap out the NVMe at some point if need be, spec it out with a lower one and buy a 2 terabyte or something. Maybe down the road they'll have 4 terabytes. Who knows? So decent inside. There's not really much they could do to change it if they wanted to maintain this level of thinness on the laptop and big battery. Okay, let's jump right into it. Keyboard, I'm expecting to be fantastic. They are not doing anything weird with them. They're basically not trying to reinvent the wheel. They're taking what is, in my opinion, probably the best Ultrabook keyboard on the market and reusing it. So we have backlighting, no RGB, just some backlighting, very nice. You can just go through here, multiple versions. I just put a max for this here. You have your embedded function keys there. Hey, it's me. You have your embedded function keys up here. You can, right now, for example, they're volume up, volume down, brightness up, brightness down. You can hit Function Escape to lock them out. So then they'll turn into function keys or alt keys. Copilot button, unfortunately, but this is the era of Copilot. I think that'll eventually be gone. Speaker grill out there. Nice big trackpad. Yeah, it's fantastic. So I'm used to this keyboard as part of it. I've used this keyboard on and off for reviews and personal laptops that I buy and use. Yoga laptops, IdeaPad Pros, Shaoshin type laptops, all of them. I just very much prefer it. It's the best laptop, Ultrabook keyboard on the market, period. It just is very snappy, very, very nice to type on. It's a joy to type on, let's just put it that way. So if you are the type of person who types a lot, works a lot, writes a lot of essays, you get this, you're going to love this keyboard here. I'm used to it, which is part of it, but I guarantee you're going to get used to it super fast and you're going to love this keyboard. So that's great. And trackpad is also my preferred trackpad for a non-haptic. Nice and smooth and a nice sharp click. Okay, so the screen here, there's multiple options. They sent me over the lower resolution screen. Shame on you, Lenovo. It's fine, honestly. You can get a higher resolution, lower resolution. They're all OLED, so it's going to be fine. At 14 inches, I'm fine with 1200p. When the laptops start to get bigger and you start to get to 16 inches, I no longer find 1200p acceptable because it starts to become blocky. Like you can actually see all the text jankiness and aliasing on the text. At 1200p, it's kind of the max I would go. At 14 inches is probably the max I would go for 1200p. 1200p will save you battery. 1600p and higher is going to use more battery. This one here is also a lower refresh at 60 hertz. So you get a lower refresh on this one and a lower resolution, which will keep the battery draw down. If you're not too worried about, burning an extra 10% or so or 15% battery life, just hanging out doing whatever, you can step up the screen there. And there are benefits if you're a creative type or something like that, you will notice it. However, this is still a beautiful 100% DCI-P3 OLED. So it's still gorgeous. It's just, you're changing the resolution and you're changing the refresh rate is primarily what you're doing when you tweak the screen here. It's not a case where some of them are bad and some of them are good. Like sometimes you get laptops where there is an OLED nice option, and then you go down to a 1200p option and it's some like 45% NTSC garbage that just looks horrible. That's not the case here. So I'm not going to turn off all my lights. We'll just use it in like natural lighting, but it's an OLED screen, so you get obviously absolute blacks. It'll be very hard to pick this up, but that's about what I see there, at least for the screen. It's just an OLED screen. There's no lights here. Absolute black, very rich. You're also getting 100% DCI-P3 color space, which allows the color space to be expanded. Reds will look significantly more vibrant, bright, and pop off the screen versus sRGB even is good, but it's lower. And then, of course, like a 45% NTSC screen is way below that. So this screen here is, honestly, it's beautiful. And you'll see that even in the greens is another place where 100% DCI-P3 color space shines, particularly in the red, but also in the greens. Now it is a reflective screen, but with the lights off, it's fine. It's also relatively bright for an OLED, not mini LED bright, but relatively bright. So it will cut through the reflections a bit. Vibrant greens. Obviously the blues look good. This area on a weaker screen, not just like OLED, just any weaker screen, even if it's an IPS, whatever, or a weaker OLED. I have a 100% DCI, 100% sRGB OLED right now that I'm reviewing, and the greens look a little bit yellowy, like a little bit dead, more dead than they actually are. Very vibrant. Whether it's calibrated or not to be, the most accurate or not, it's not the point here. What they are is they're very saturated, very rich. So for content consumption, watching shows, and then for obviously creating visuals, it's going to be beautiful. And this laptop here, spoiler for the gaming section, does have a very capable iGPU for gaming. So color spaces like this are beautiful for gaming. That's another area where you're really going to watch it pop. Yeah, so the speakers are fantastic as anticipated. Yogas, generally speaking, are equipped with Lenovo's best speakers. I guess some of their like really high-end Legions would have this type of speakers. But typically, if you look at the Lenovo lineup, generally speaking, the Yogas have the best speakers. That's the case here. Sometimes the Pros will have a little bit more bass, especially if they're 16-inch. They're bigger, more chassis to them, more oomph. But overall, for such a thin laptop, this has fantastic speakers. So for consumption, you're going to be getting a lot of very good visuals off of the beautiful screen. Personally, if I bought this, I would buy the higher screen. That's just me, but that's your pick. Even this model here is great. Audio, fantastic coming out of it, and then inputting into it is also fantastic. You're going to have a beautiful keyboard here, beautiful trackpad, and touchscreen. Okay, so now what we're going to do is look at some thermals and noise, wattages, all that. We will get to the benchmarks after this, like the actual performance. This does have the typical function queue switching through performance modes. So you have balance mode, eco mode, performance mode. These should theoretically adjust the wattages, therefore temperatures and fan noise. These chips are very efficient, so I do suspect that we're going to get pretty good performance on all of those modes. But let's start with the performance mode here, see how the thermals are and the noise. I also do not expect this laptop to get loud at all. Let's push the back up slightly here, just so we're not disadvantaging it. So in performance mode, it's dumping 35 watts to start. I don't know if it'll sustain that or not, but that's pretty standard for this chip. It peaks a little bit higher. Thermals are fine. Again, dual fan setup, dual heat pipe setup on a 35 watt chassis. It's not going to be an issue. Pretty quiet for a performance mode setting on a thin laptop. It's not silent by any means. This is kind of the loudest that I would want a laptop to be and just be like, you can totally ignore it. But the fan noise profile is not pitchy, not whining. It's just a very light air movement noise, like a very quiet fan in another room during the summer would be kind of what I equate this to. Not even in the room you're in. Very, very kind of low pitch. Yeah, and so it's sustaining actually around 30 or so, a little over 30, so that's fine. Let's come to balanced mode, see if that tweaks wattage. A little bit. A few watts down. A little bit quieter. This is getting to the noise level where if you're sitting beside someone and you're, running a render or something with them beside you, it won't bother them. And we'll go one more. Now, the Cinebench scores, just so you know, later, are not going to be absolutely fantastic. Lunar Lake actually does kind of bad in Cinebench because it's not the type of laptop where it has, not the type of chip where it has, 8 performance cores and 16 efficiency cores and 97 threads. It doesn't even have, let's see here, it doesn't even have threads. That doesn't show you there. Oh, there it is. Yeah. So just 8 cores, no threads. It's just, the performance is just what it is. It's still fantastic for video editing, just so you know, because Intel has such good renderers, just so you know. Intel hardware renderers are very good. I prefer them over AMD and NVIDIA, especially over NVIDIA, but even over AMD, I prefer them. So despite the fact that this is not giving you some massive Cinebench score, trust me, you can do a lot of very high-end video editing on this thing, especially rendering. Silent mode is like no watts. Look at that, 15. It's around 35 or so. That's like my noise floor, just so you know. My house is, it's not a quiet house. Actually, my fan just turned on. My ceiling vent is now louder than this laptop. I can't hear it. Now, this is one area where the Lunar Lake stuff excels. They have a huge uplift in the iGPU performance on the Lunar Lake chips, Intel, over even Core Ultra. Core Ultra was good, but the problem with the Core Ultra stuff, Generation 1, Series 1, is that it needed more watts to be performant. Lunar Lake does not. It's a very efficient chip. It's not quite as fast as the best from AMD, the 890M, obviously. It performs somewhere around the 780M, which is fantastic, honestly. Very fantastic, sometimes better. I've already done videos on this, but we'll just show it on this laptop. And you may think, well, I've had people in the comments sometimes be like, It's a business machine. Why are you showing gaming performance? Because people play games. Period. So gaming performance is going to be fantastic. You're going to be able to rip out games like this. This is Baldur's Gate. It's not on low. This is medium. This is medium. The game is not easy to run. If you have some of these handhelds, last generation handhelds with the 780M or a Steam Deck, you know that you just can't get this performance, period, on those handhelds. This is very good, right? Very, very, very good. Just quality scaling too. You could turn up scaling, you could turn it down. It's your pick. Now, one thing of note here is how gorgeous this game looks on an OLED screen. I find that Baldur's Gate is particularly beautiful on an OLED or on a mini LED or high color space screens in general, 100% DCI-P3, because it's just a vibrant game. It's very, very vibrant. There's lots of bright colors, things that pop off the screen, lots of blacks as well. So a high contrast screen like an OLED will look particularly nice, even over an IPS in this game here. This game is actually an iGPU killer. That's why I tested it. It hits the CPU and the GPU very hard. It's not just a GPU bound game. It'll hit both. So typically, if a chip can run this game, when it's an APU, it can run any game, because typically this is one of the harder ones to run. This is a very hard area to run, the last light in. You can see we're only pulling 33 watts. Now we're going to kick this down into balance mode. It might go up and then probably the same, I would assume. Yeah, because it's hitting the GPU and the CPU. Very quiet too. I can turn this down. The mic will probably exaggerate it, but it is very quiet. We'll go down to silent. Silent mode, you can see we dropped down 15 watts, and we're still getting pretty good performance. We have to decrease the settings in that. But that's one of the nice things about this chip. This is an iGPU killer, but a game that's a couple of years old, 3-4 years old, you'll be fine on silent mode, like legitimately. Right here, you could, if you're going to go with something like that, you could always just turn it down to low, something like that. Turn this back up. All right, now you're back up over 30 on silent mode on an iGPU. Very capable graphics on these Lunar Lake. That's one of the things that Intel was lacking, right? People play games, period. It's just they do. And you would always grab AMD because AMD just performs so much better. You get the same rough CPU performance, but then you get a better iGPU. Not really anymore. Obviously, the 890M from AMD is more powerful of an iGPU. It's also massively more expensive and higher wattage, but more specifically, it's massively more expensive. The Lunar Lake here has a very balanced profile to it, and it performs very well. This game is more than playable at this. This game is playable at 30, let alone 45 in this hard to run area. It's actually going up even more now. I'm not going to test more games. I will just assure you that the Lunar Lake chip, specifically this one with the 140V iGPU, is an absolute gaming beast for the wattages that it offers. Just a quick few benchmarks here, nothing special. The included NVMe is actually surprisingly fast for being a 2242 size. This is honestly the fastest 2242 I've ever seen, at least to date. The Wi-Fi is also very fast. This is as fast as my Wi-Fi can possibly go, very stable, very quick. Battery life is essentially the strongest suit of this laptop. When you're idling here, just kind of hanging out, doing whatever, with full brightness, you're still going to get about 14 hours because we're using about 5 watts idle, somewhere around there. So that's crazy good battery life. And then heavy browsing, ripping through some websites and that. 1080p, 60 YouTube, we're going to be burning around 7.5 watts, maybe up to 8 at most. So you're going to get about 8 or 9 hours of heavy use. The only time it's really going to go down, obviously if you're doing things like video editing or code compile or something like that. But real world use, you're looking at 9 hours, 10 hours, 11 hours on this laptop without any issues. Messy desk. Have some stuff out there behind me there. Messy desk. Camera looking pretty good though. It's kind of lightening it up a little bit. Maybe not. Maybe I just am that pale. I don't know. It's springtime. The polling rate looks fine overall. Looks fairly crisp. Might be doing a little bit of like AI sharpening. I'm not sure. It's doing a pretty good job there. Let's bring in something red. This Logitech just so we get a little color. No, it's fine. I guess I just am that pale now. Yeah. Tanning's for suckers, bro. So, yeah, the colors actually do look fine. I didn't anticipate that I was this pale in March. It looks fine, though. Honestly, good webcam. You'd expect from this type of laptop, this class of laptop, to have a good webcam, and it does. Conclusion time. It's fantastic. Should you buy it? Probably. Unless you're looking for a gaming laptop, like an actual gaming laptop with, dedicated graphics for higher level performance, or you need 16-inch laptop, of course, then you should buy something like that. But if you're looking for a 14-inch Ultrabook laptop that is incredibly thin, impossibly thin almost, but is equipped with Intel's Lunar Lake chip, which allows it to be very efficient with this thin chassis, this is the one to go for. Last generation, AMD was more efficient than the Core Ultra from Intel. Both of them would be a little bit less performant at lower watts, but the Core Ultra Series 1 especially. Once you lower those watts down to something like this, like a 30, 35 watt chassis, that chip did start to choke, especially the graphical performance. That's not an issue here. The Lunar Lake stuff is incredibly efficient. Once you decrease those wattages down to 30, that's where it performs. You go above that, doesn't do much extra, and you can actually go lower and lower and lower on this chip. So this thing is going to be a battery king, honestly. Fantastic. Very premium, awesome screen. You can get this model here with the 1200p screen just to get you a little bit more battery life, or you can get the higher refresh screen with the higher resolution, get a little bit less battery life, but a little bit more clarity. Awesome speakers, awesome chassis, best-in-class keyboard. Internals look fine overall. I mean, what else is there? Let's just finish off the video. Oh, you can play games too as well, very well. So let's just finish off the video. This thing is an incredible laptop, and honestly, the price is very fair. Laptop prices are going up this generation. In 2025, they're getting very expensive. This is not the case for that. It's not like free, but what you're getting out of this laptop is totally fair for the price. So I think you should buy it unless you're looking for a 16-inch laptop or a gaming laptop, of course, or something with, just outstanding, massive desktop replacement level CPU. This is the one to buy. Honestly, this is the one to buy. It's fantastic. Maybe I'll steal it, and Lenovo will never see me again. Or I could just buy one.